You see Trump using the rise in anti-Semitism to stifle free speech, to take away visas. That's not making Jews any safer. He's literally gutting the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So glad you decided to pull up today because we have got an absolute fire conversation lined up for you. In this clip, journalist Mehdi Hasan sits down with California Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, the youngest Jewish member of Congress, and the two of them go deep on some of the most uncomfortable truths the American political establishment has spent years trying to bury. We are talking about the weaponizing of anti-Semitism for political gain, the Iron Dome funding debate, the war powers fight over Iran, and a stunning moment where Mehdi delivers what might be the most accurate line about Republican lawmakers I have ever heard on television. Trust me, you are going to want to stay locked in all the way through, because the back half of this conversation hits harder than the front half, and you do not want to miss where it lands. Also, while you are here, drop a quick comment and let me know what country or city you are tuning in from. I genuinely love seeing where everyone is watching from around the world. All right, let's jump right into it.
During our weekly Ask the Editor live stream this week, one of our Zeteo subscribers basically just openly said, I don't think I can support the Democratic Party again after what happened under Biden with genocide. Genocide is just a deal breaker for me, he said. And many said this, as you know, in 2024. Yeah. How does the party earn back the trust of voters like that?
Yeah, well, frankly, I called on and pushed the Biden administration to do more to end the conflict. And we did see that when the Biden administration did apply leverage to Bibi Netanyahu, one single shipment of bombs that they didn't send, humanitarian assistance then got into Gaza. And so I do think it's important that we use our leverage with all of our partners and allies and treat all of our partners and allies equally and to the same standard. We already have laws around what our weapons can be used for. We already have laws around not being allowed to send weapons to countries that are impeding humanitarian assistance, and those should have been enforced under the Biden administration and now. And I'm actually a co-lead of the Block the Bombs Act, which would prohibit the U.S. from sending offensive weapons to Israel for the same reason, which is that the Netanyahu administration, they have been doing horrible things, not only in Gaza, also in Lebanon and throughout the region. And it is important for us as the U.S. to not sort of cede that decision-making to Bibi Netanyahu. It is not in our national security interest to have other countries see that we somehow have different standards for our partners and allies. So that's why I think it's incredibly important that we hold our partners and allies to the same standard, to the laws that we already have. Why I introduced this Block the Bombs Act, and why I will continue to push for the U.S. to use all the leverage that we have to end what's happening, to end what's happening in the Middle East, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Iran. I'm the youngest Jewish member of Congress. This is an issue that's deeply personal to me. My family lives in Israel, so this is not like theoretical for me. And it's.
I want to come back to that in one moment. Just on, you mentioned Block the Bombs Act. We had Congresswoman Delia Ramirez on the show, who was one of the leads introducing that. And you said something there which a lot of viewers' ears will pick up because it's such a topical issue right now. You said offensive weapons.
Yeah.
You know, after Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's recent statement about Iron Dome, about the US should not fund Iron Dome either. They can buy it, but we shouldn't be funding it, quote unquote, defensive weapons.
Yeah.
There's a big debate about whether there is such a thing as a defensive weapon because Israel uses all its weapons as part of its attacks on Lebanon, Iran, Gaza, etc. Where do you stand on Iron Dome and funding Iron Dome?
Yeah, so I think that there is a key difference between funding and allowing countries to buy. So I agree that Israel has the GDP, they have the money, they should be buying their own things. Like, we should not be subsidizing them to buy it. And, you know, frankly, my family lives in Israel. They get free healthcare there. We don't have free healthcare here. Like, we should be spending the $4 billion we send them to do that here. However, I don't think we should prevent them from buying Iron Dome interceptors, because I don't think, just like I don't think Palestinian civilians should be punished for the actions of the people in charge, I don't think Iranian civilians should be punished for the actions of the people in charge, I don't think Israeli civilians should be punished for the actions of the people in charge of them. I actually founded the Protection of Civilians in Conflict Caucus in my first term in Congress, because I believe so strongly that regardless of what's happening with the governmental leaders, we need to be doing a better job of protecting civilians. Civilians are not responsible for the actions of their government.
This is the moment that should make every single Democratic strategist in Washington wake up in a cold sweat, because when Mehdi reads out that Zateo subscriber message, the one that says, "I don't think I can support the Democratic Party again after what happened under Biden with genocide." Genocide is just a deal breaker for me. That is not just one angry voter venting online. That is millions of people. That is the Michigan margin. That is the Pennsylvania margin. That is the entire reason the party lost in 2024. And the leadership still refuses to internalize it. And here is what blows my mind. Sarah Jacobs sits there and tells you the truth that nobody in leadership wants to admit. She says when the previous administration finally applied real pressure, when they held back one shipment of bombs, humanitarian aid suddenly started flowing into Gaza. One shipment. That is the entire game. That is the entire leverage equation. They had it the whole time and they refused to use it. Then she drops this. Sarah said this: "I'm a co-lead of the Block the Bombs Act, which would prohibit the U.S. from sending offensive weapons to Israel." That is what an actual elected representative sounds like when they take their job seriously. Not focus grouped, not poll tested, not hiding behind diplomatic language. She is naming the policy, naming the bill, and putting her name on it. And then comes the line that should be on a billboard in every American city. Sarah said this: "My family lives in Israel. They get free health care there. We don't have free health care here. We should be spending the $4 billion we send them to do that here." Let that sink in. Working Americans cannot afford insulin. Parents are choosing between rent and chemotherapy, and we are subsidizing universal health care for another country while our own people die from preventable conditions. That is not foreign policy. That is a betrayal of every taxpayer in this country, and you have to understand the credibility she is bringing here. Sarah said this: "I'm the youngest Jewish member of Congress. This is deeply personal to me. My family lives in Israel, so this is not theoretical for me. She cannot be smeared. She cannot be dismissed. She is doing the thing the political establishment fears most. She is showing that Jewish Americans are not a monolith, and the loudest voices claiming to speak for them have been lying for decades."
Things on that before we move on. One is, do you recognize the argument that a lot of people make, which is it's not a defensive weapon because that shield that Iron Dome gives Israel is what emboldens its military adventurism. It allows them to bomb, as they did last year, six countries in the Middle East. I can't think of any other Middle Eastern country that bombed 6 of its neighbors last year without any repercussions, without any consequences. It's the playground bully that can't be touched. That's one argument. And the other argument is Palestinians don't have an Iron Dome. The Lebanese don't have an Iron Dome.
Yeah. Listen, I think we should be protecting civilians everywhere, and this is, part of why I say this is so personal to me, right? Because I get a selfie from my cousin every time they go into their bomb shelter, right? Which is very frequently, but Palestinian moms don't even have bomb shelters to take their kids to. So to me, that doesn't mean we should take away the protections that Israeli civilians have. It means we should be doing a better job of protecting civilians everywhere.
Just one last question on this topic on Israel. You mentioned your family and you're the youngest Jewish member of Congress. What do you say to people, especially now on the right, but also in kind of mainstream Jewish American Zionist organizations, who say the Democrats, they're just an anti-Semitic party now. The left is all anti-Semitic. They hate Jews. They hate Israel. For many of us, there seems to be a conflation between American Jews and Israel, and especially the Netanyahu government. What's your response as a Jewish Democrat who is co-sponsoring the Block the Bombs Act, which would, I'm sure, upset some of your friends and family in Israel, maybe?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, I have been so angry at both the Trump administration and many mainstream organizations weaponizing Jewish pain and the very real rise in anti-Semitism to accomplish their political goals that actually have nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And I feel very strongly that we need to be very clear about what is legitimate criticism of the policies of the government of Israel and what is anti-Semitism. And it's frankly not what we hear from a lot of these mainstream organizations. I'll give you an example. I had a colleague of mine literally make an anti-Semitic joke about my nose. and barely a peep from these organizations. And then, we work on Block the Bombs. We try and do real policy about real policy implications. And frankly, not holding Israel to a different standard, but holding Israel to the same standard that we hold other countries. And a lot of these organizations will say we're being anti-Semitic. And so you see Trump using the rise in anti-Semitism to stifle free speech, to take away visas. That's not making Jews any safer. He's literally gutting the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, which is the entity that helps protect Jewish students on campus, all the while saying he's doing it to protect Jewish students. So the hypocrisy is ridiculous. And there is a very real rise in anti-Semitism right now, and we need to be doing a lot more to address it.
By the president, some would say.
And I would argue Bibi Netanyahu has a large role to play in that rise in anti-Semitism. And they are the president, the people around the president, who are literally Nazis.
Okay, this is where Mehdi just absolutely cooks, and I need you to pay attention because the framing here is something American media has been terrified to say out loud for 20 years. Mehdi said this: that shield that Iron Dome gives Israel is what emboldens its military adventurism. It allows them to bomb 6 countries in the Middle East. It's the playground bully that can't be touched. 6 countries in 1 year. Bombed, with 0 consequences. Name another nation on Earth that gets to do that. You can't. Because there isn't one. And here is what people don't realize. The whole concept of a, quote, defensive weapon collapses the second you understand that the defense is what enables the offense. You give a country a perfect shield, and suddenly every reckless military decision becomes consequence-free. That is not defense. That is a permission slip for endless war. But the part that really hit me is when Sarah pivoted to the anti-Semitism conversation, because this is the rhetorical trap the right has been using for decades, and it finally has a Jewish member of Congress willing to dismantle it on camera. Sarah said this: I have been so angry at both the current administration and many mainstream organizations weaponizing Jewish pain and the very real rise in anti-Semitism to accomplish their political goals. That is the entire playbook in one sentence. Manufacture a crisis, blame your political enemies, then use the moral panic to crush dissent. It has nothing to do with protecting Jewish people. It is about silencing critics. And then she lands the kill shot, the receipt that ends the entire fake conservative pro-Jewish narrative forever. Sarah said this: he's literally gutting the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, which is the entity that helps protect Jewish students on campus, all the while saying he's doing it to protect Jewish students. The hypocrisy is unreal. You are dismantling the actual government office that handles anti-Semitism complaints, and then you go on television and claim you are the protector of Jewish Americans? That is the most cynical, most insulting performance in modern American politics. Here is some context for anyone who needs it. The Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education was established back in 1967, and for over half a century, it has been the primary enforcement mechanism for civil rights complaints in American schools, including discrimination based on religion. Gutting it does not protect anyone. It removes protection from everyone. And then Sarah says the quiet part out loud, which honestly takes guts. She points out that the people surrounding the current president include figures who openly traffic in actual neo-fascist ideology. When a sitting member of Congress who is Jewish, who has family in Israel, tells you the people running the show are walking around with that kind of rhetoric, you should believe her.
Yes?
Yeah.
I just got to ask one, have you had friends, you're in California, born and raised in California, you're a congresswoman in California, you're a Jewish congresswoman. Have you had friends, family, voters, people come to you and say, I'm done with you because of your stance on Palestine?
Yes.
How have you dealt with that?
It's really tough. It's really tough. It especially feels hard because often it's people I grew up with in the synagogue I grew up with. I was the president of the youth group of my synagogue. I'm very deeply connected to my Judaism. And, frankly, for me, and I think for a lot of young Jews, this is you often see this, it's a real generational divide. And for a lot of young Jews, we feel like our Jewish values are what are compelling us to speak out about this right now. Awesome. And it's really hard when the people who, were there teaching us these Jewish values, are saying that we're doing something wrong or hurting our community.
Let's talk about Iran before we run out of time. By the time this airs, there will have been a vote in Congress and the House on the latest War Powers Resolution vote. Is Congress, which seems to have abdicated its constitutional war-making role, is it any closer to stopping this illegal war in Iran?
I'm actually hopeful that we will be able to get that vote passed. I think we will have unanimous support by Democrats this time, and that we will get enough Republicans to vote for it. I mean, it's hard to say because my Republican colleagues often will tell me something crosses a red line and then not do anything about it. But I do think the president's tweet literally threatening genocide against the Iranian people is, I'm hopeful, a bridge too far for many of my Republican colleagues, and they will vote with us.
I think you'll find that there are no bridges too far for many Republicans in Congress. We're also now, my colleague Swin Soupsang is reporting that Donald Trump's team is now looking at Cuba. They're already planning the next war. Is there anything Congress Democrats can do to get ahead of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we need to have a proactive war powers resolution before he invades Cuba, saying that he can't do that. And I also think we need to think really strategically about funding. So, first of all, I don't think any Democrat should vote for whatever supplemental funding the president requests for this war in Iran, because we've seen many courts say that voting for funding is de facto authorizing a conflict, and we should be very clear that this is not an authorized conflict. But I think we also should be using the power of the purse, which is what Congress has, to say that, you can't use any of the money we've appropriated to start a war in Cuba. You can't use any of the money we've appropriated to start a war in Iran or in Venezuela. We need to be much more prescriptive about how money can be used, especially.
Oh, and the second Will gets backed into the corner, watch what he reaches for. Russia Gate. He literally says this is just Russia Gate recircled, like the people raising obvious concerns about foreign influence are doing the same thing the Democrats did in 2016. And here's what people don't realize. That comparison is insane. Russiagate was based on alleged secret meetings, hacked emails, and supposed compromat that nobody could ever actually produce. What Buckley and Dave are pointing to is the Secretary of State on camera, a State Department legal memo, and decades of an open lobbying apparatus that has publicly been pushing for this exact war for 30 years. One of those is a documented public record. The other was a cable news fever dream. They are not even in the same universe. And Dave Smith, who in my opinion is doing some of the cleanest political analysis in this entire panel, lands the closing punch perfectly. He calls this a war of choice. That is the most unpopular war in American history. Let that sit for a second. The most unpopular war in American history. Not Vietnam, not the second Iraq invasion, this one. And then Dave drops the political prediction that I think is going to age really well. He said this exactly. I don't think Rubio or Vance or anyone attached to this administration has a shot at being the next nominee, because here's the truth that the war defenders refuse to face. You cannot run on America first and then drag the country into a Middle East war that the public did not want, that the base did not want, that the entire campaign promised would never happen, and expect there to be no political consequences. The voters are not stupid. They remember what they were promised. They see what they got. And when the midterms come, when the next primary comes, those receipts are going to matter. The wing of the party that backed this war is going to find out the hard way that loyalty to a foreign policy disaster is not the same thing as loyalty to your voters, and they are about to learn that lesson in the most expensive way possible. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.